Hey guys, it's Kristi. Happy Sunday to you. Sorry, I'm kind of playing around a little bit with the pre-show stuff because I realized I definitely done some stuff. I messed with the sound on that I'll need to fix. But I'm not muted, so that's good. I'm also looking. It looks like I'm really blown out brightness-wise. So I'm going to try turning down one of my lights here a little bit, and I look a little bit laggy. So having a great day, basically, so far in terms of that. It might just be because of the speed. I put my show on a particularly a bad speed to check on it. So anyway, hello guys. Sorry, I am a little bit flustered. I always think if I wake up and get going by 10, that's going to be plenty of time for me to get ready, and somehow it never is. I always end up needing longer. But anyway, it's good to be here. It's good to see you on a Sunday. A little laggy, but not too bad. Okay, yeah. I'll try what I can do. Is I don't really, as long as the show is running, I don't need to see that. So that should be fine. I can also check it on my tablet, or my handy dandy tablet, which, by the way, now you probably won't be able to see because it's so I've got pictures from Venice. Pictures from Venice. Yes, we're going to do that this Sunday. I've got some philosophy of social science lined up, and we're going to talk about this crazy president, this absolutely illegal presidency, and I've also got myself set up in such a way that I should be able to see the chat easier. I've set up the window in my interface right below where my camera is. So now I can hopefully keep up with you guys a little bit easier than looking down with my head on my tablet. You know, looking down, you get the shot of my forehead. So, yeah, hello. Let's start off with some nice stuff, and then we'll get into increasingly crappy things. I had thought perhaps to bring some pictures from Venice. You guys probably know I've been talking about it for a lot lately online, talking about my trip to Venice, and I thought about doing this complicated thing where I brought it into my OBS environment. Then I just realized, actually I can just show pictures by showing my screen share and sharing that. So I'm going to do that. I'll make myself very, very tiny, and I'll talk a little bit about these pictures from Venice. Yes, I made sure. Yes, my new muted sign. I'm just checking the chat. There we go. Everything seems to be going fine. The chat's working, and I'm on air. Okay, sorry. I just get a little bit paranoid. I'm still new to the OBS thing. Want to make sure I'm not broadcasting to nobody. That'd be slightly embarrassing, but that seems to be working out just fine as well. Cool. I was at a workshop on cross-national measurement of education, employment, and industry in European surveys. Why is that important? I talked to Kevin a little bit about this off air, even though he did tease me about it on air. But off air, we also had the same conversation where he teased me. And I made the point that, and he took it on board, that in the natural sciences, they've built telescopes and microscopes and CERN in order to have instruments that allow them to observe the world more accurately. That we can always do a little bit more. Just going to show your comment there, Mike. There's always an opportunity with new technology or new advancements in understanding to improve our instruments. In social science, our surveys are our instruments. We also use experiments, lab experiments, candidate evaluations, and then modify certain characteristics of the candidates presented in the experiment to people in the social sciences, for instance. But our surveys are our instruments, and having precise measurement is always important in science. And this workshop was focused on different challenges people were facing in doing that, in getting a better instrument, or in measuring the thing that they were interested in. And one would think that education wouldn't be that complicated until you start to compare how different countries have organized and divided or specialized their education and training, or how much the impact of you know, just having a developed country that's benefited from colonialism versus being a developed country has in terms of educational structures. Therefore, if we want to say this elementary school education or primary education universally will produce these sorts of events in your society or will produce these outcomes in your society, how can we say that if we don't precisely measure primary education or secondary education or vocational training? This workshop was about some solutions. We're also creating digital tools that will help help researchers standardize how they harmonize their measures. So if you have, there is something called like the ISCAD, the International Standard Code for Education, and it's updated every 10 or 20 years. I'm not an educational specialist, so I don't have all these things off the top of my head, but there's ISCAD, and it has been changed over time because life changes over time. But when you're given the ISCAD and the instructions, there isn't like a body that makes sure you're coding things correctly. So this might be some interpretation. And we're finding as social scientists that by using digital infrastructures, by building things like a website that has examples of standardized coding, that we are providing non-specialists with guidance that they would otherwise lack. That's important because if we can get non-specialists to use a similar standard or to cite a standard that's comparable with other studies, that means that their research can then be located within a larger body of work. Like the natural sciences, you can't take an experiment where you give somebody 150 milligrams of aspirin and another study where you gave someone consistently 100 milligrams of aspirin and compare these two things and say, oh, well, it's kind of like the same dose. So no, they're different doses. You need to kind of classify them in that way. Same thing with these measures. So by trying to make it easier for people to be precise and replicate the same work, we have more power as social scientists to observe the world consistently and say something across studies. That's my pitch for why something as boring as educational measures you can get kind of geeky about it, and it can be quite interesting from a challenge point of view. So speaking of challenges in the social sciences, shall we do our, where is my camera? Here we go. Philosophy of social science. We're going to look again at the philosophical foundations of social thought. This again, it was published by Ted Benton and Ian Crabe, and I found earlier on page 110 some more interesting things about how to think about the social sciences. This one comes out of their chapter 7 on critical rationality, an introduction to Hegel, Marx, and the dialectic. We're not going to start at the introduction though. I found a little interesting bit on ideology. So we're going to read, let's say 2 or 3, maybe even a 4th paragraph on this. But we're going to start here with the concept of ideology on page 110. It is here that we meet for the first time in this book a theory of ideology, a notion which seems to have all but disappeared from contemporary social science, with its emphasis on language and discourse, and the assertion or implication that the way in which people see the world is the world. This idea is present in the varieties of instrumental rationality that we studied in Chapter 5, and the conception of rationality as rule-following and hermeneutics we looked at in Chapter 6. All of these approaches recognize that people can be wrong in their perceptions and conceptions of the social world, but not that they can be systematically mistaken or misled by the type of society in which they live. Although ideology was originally used to refer to the possible science of ideas, it was taken over by Marx and Marxists and used in various ways. At its simplest, it is used to mean a set of ideas which serve the interests of a particular social class. In the Hegelian tradition, developed through the work of George Lucas. Oh, we're going to get back to Venice in a second. I just remembered we did nothing on the Venice except for that one picture. So let's do this and then we'll finish up with Venice. Sorry, guys. In the Hegelian tradition, developed through the work of Gregor Lucas, the notion of totality and a second nature is central. In the first volume of his Kapital, Marx argues that the market system works to disguise relationships between human beings as relationships between things, commodities, and that human beings themselves have come to be seen and see themselves as commodities governed by the workings of the market. This attempt to use the methods of the natural sciences in the social sciences reproduces this, also treating people and relationships as things. These things are isolated for analysis and seen as static and one-dimensional. They are separated from the dynamic totality of historical development. This separation of the social sciences from each other is part of this, rather as the chemist might break down and analyze a compound substance into its various parts. So the social sciences break down human beings and human relationships into supposed component parts and study those parts in isolation from each other. Sociology, psychology, economics, history all develop along their separate paths, searching for their own laws, or at least their own forms of knowledge. In this way, society takes itself, In this way, society itself takes on the status of an object as unchangeable as nature. It becomes a second nature. I'm just going to continue to this next paragraph. This process of analytic study might very well be important for the social sciences, but it remains ideologically as long as we do not situate our study in the wider context. For example, to study male psychology or female psychology as if it were fixed and unchanging and unconnected with changes at all levels in wider society is ideological, blind to a wider reality, which thus remains beyond understanding and criticism. Similarly, when sociologists study the emotions simply in terms of the social rules about showing emotions, their work becomes ideological since it excludes understanding that comes through biology, different types of psychology, and history. I like this idea a lot. I want to come back to this, because I think it's important and it's a really super valid point. Marx argues that the market system works to disguise relationships between human beings as relationships between things, commodities, and that the human beings themselves come to be seen and see themselves as commodities governed by the workings of the market. And if you look at, Howard Schultz, you look at conservatives today, you look at the way that people think about universities as basically, someone described it, a comedian described it as a small business loan. You take a small business loan to get a degree because the small business is yourself. You are dehumanizing yourself and you are turning education into a function of the market unconsciously without really realizing it. So I thought that was a good little paragraph to read here. And now that I'm realizing I completely got off track with the Venice pictures, we're going to go back to that. But think about that a little bit. Think about the way in which frameworks we use, like capitalism, set us up to dehumanize in some ways ourselves and think about everything in terms of the market's value, commodities, efficiencies, what's doing well, what's good for sales, what's not. So what are you guys talking about? Action movies? You're so bored in the chat? Right, all right, now let's get on with the show and tell, now that I've remembered that we were talking about Venice before I got distracted, which happens a lot because it's early morning and I've only had a little bit of coffee. What you're looking at here in this big old picture behind me, this is where the Duce of Venice, the Doge, sorry. I've heard Doge or Doge or whatever. I prefer Doge. I don't know why, but when he would address the people of Venice, he would stand in this area here, which is between, I think it's like Mars and another god, I don't know, like sort of representations of the Greek ideal. And then over here, this is the symbol of St. Mark, which St. Mark is very important to Venice. San Marco is the cathedral there. And traditionally of the four apostles, Mark is associated with the lion. And so they've got St. Mark, sort of the symbol of St. Mark, above him. And he would come and stand in these steps right here and address the people. So that's at the Doge's palace in Venice. And I'm stood there. I again went kind of early in the morning, so it was not as full, and it was fantastic to be there in February if you start about, it opens, I think this one at 8:30 in the morning. I got there a little bit after 9 probably because I got a little bit lost. Google Maps is really good for Venice, but you still can get a little bit, you know, it's hard to tell which small side street until you're halfway down, and then it reroutes you before you know it. And anyway, Mars is the Roman war. Oh, thank you. Yes. Thanks to 55. The Mars is the Roman war of God. You were talking about Ares if it was the Greek. Thank you for the correction from the chat. The other one might be Zeus. I'd have to look it up though. But, all right. This is in the square. You can see this picture here. It's a big pillar. I don't know what it is. I didn't have a guidebook that I was reading along the way, but it was a very pretty picture, and that's mostly why I took it. This is from the same steps, but from behind. So if you go through the Doge's palace, you come out, the gift shop is like right back here. And there was nobody outside going along in this back area. It was completely empty. Again, as I said, I was one of the early in terms of going through the palace. And yeah, you can actually look down. So you can see the butt. This is butt. And there's the arch underneath. I've got a few more shots of this. Oh, that's an internal door. Very fancy. I think I might have had to clean my lens. That's why it's a bit on the fuzzy side. And then inside the palace, every room that was used in aid of like an official state person. Thanks 255 Jupiter, not Zeus. Thank you. I mean, I do appreciate the corrections, but it's a little bit pedantic. I know you're right. I know you're right. And I do appreciate it, but sometimes, like I said, my brain is a little bit of my brain is a little bit tired, and the, you know, Ares and Mars and Zeus and Jupiter, they are kind of conflated. Yes, Greek, Roman, I take on your point. All right. Yeah, and inside you just have this amazing gold leaf, I should say, artwork everywhere. This is a picture outside of, I think it's it's along the outside of the Doge's palace. So when you walk from the San Marco toward the entrance, the formal entrance now where the museum is, you get this really beautiful archway. And sadly, this guy is in my shot, but I waited, and in the next shots, people are just walking through here. So you just have to ignore. I'll put a mouse over him. But I liked of course, the symmetry, which is the effect that they really, you know, emphasize here with the arches, these Romanesque arches, and because it's pre-Gothic by the looks of it looks Romanesque in terms of the architecture that I saw while I was there. This is the prisons. Actually, this is the prison area of the Doge's palace. You get the iron bars and the very, very small windows letting in a bit of light. This is a shot from the gondola trip that I took, which was a very good time. I didn't have as much fun as Tom McDonald. I see you in the chat, Tom. I think I saw you there. He, yeah, there you go. He went and had a very good time with his gondola driver. I was with some people who were Italian, and they just chatted back and forth with the gondola person, but that allowed me plenty of time to dangerously stick my arm out over the gondola to get video. I've got some video I'm hoping to edit in a little video postcard. But we went along the back streets of Venice. It was silent. It was so peaceful. Some of the time we were there was no one else around us. It was just us and the gondola and Venice. And it was so nice. One, because it was quiet. Two, because it felt like daily life. It felt like an ordinary Venetian day as opposed to the throngs of tourists that you see, you know, being one. Even though you are part of the problem of the tourists in Venice, you know, you kind of want to get away from the tourists. And so the gondola ride was nice for that. And then we did it near the end of the day. So there was and it was a very sunny day. So there was a lot of really golden light available. And as you can see here, I mean, one of the things I love about this picture is the reflection, and you get that gold in the water here. You get the catching of the Italian warm colors of yellow and orange. And it goes well with the gondola, I think. So this was at sunset. And the light you see here in the canal, the Venetian canal, is a reflection from the storefronts. And then it gets darker because you get less light directly on where the main path is. And you can see the glow of the city a little bit farther, another part of the city there, area a little farther away. But what I love about my camera, the one that I'm recording on right now, I love my Samsung Galaxy S Plus. I am eyeing up a Galaxy S10, but probably not for another year. But this camera, inside, it takes in so much light. So it is probably a magnitude of light, like there's 5 times less light in reality than there was in this camera. When you looked at dusk through this camera, everything just glowed. And the sky was not this color in reality. The sky was not this sort of hint of purple, but the Samsung picks it up, and I just go with it. I mean, it makes life look more beautiful than it is, and so that's one of the reasons I love my camera. Samsung is the Roman god. Yeah, it might be the Roman god of low light. Now here we go. So this is also from backwards. The pictures are out of order, maybe because of the folder I'm using. But here are the 2 gods that we saw before, and this was where this person is down here, that little dot. That was basically where I was stood to get the earlier shots. And at the time, there was nobody walking along, and then I waved at this guy who was taking pictures. Like, hey, I'm in your shot. And then I got out of his shot. I was also quite hurried. I only had a couple hours, and I tried to make the most of it. And so as a consequence, these doors aren't perfectly balanced. It's hard to sometimes just eyeball these things inside of a mobile camera, but it's still a great butt shot. More butts. Definitely a lot of butt in this area. When I talk about how the Samsung captures color, this is another example of this. When I went inside San Marco, it is Romanesque in that it's cozy. The Germans might say gemütlich. It's a comfy, cozy, intimate sort of space. But as a consequence, you know, with before the technology to do the Gothic arch, which distributes the weight of higher floors in an angle and downward that they can then buttress. You guys know the flying buttresses. You get a lot of small windows, arched windows, and you get a lot less light. The technological revolution that was Gothic architecture was soaring height. It was something narrow. A lot of times Gothic windows are quite narrow, but they do allow for a higher expanse and also just an enormous amount of light to flood into the building. Romanesque, and there's also a lot of Byzantine influence in here as well. You don't get that much light. But again, in my camera, this all around it is gold, and it looks like it's shimmering. It's not nearly that nice in real life. In some ways, it's like you want to do a VR. You just want to put your VR camera on, but just you know, have it as not a virtual reality, but just look at the church through your camera, because the gold shines and shimmers and glimmers and glistens through the camera in a way that it simply doesn't in real life. And so that's another. I have some more stuff of the cathedral inside, but I have to edit that into video. But you can see that this is really beautiful artwork very early on, I would say. I mean, I'm going to guess early again, contemporaneous to the Romanesque period. And quite a lot of gold leaf everywhere was definitely, almost had a Greek Orthodox sort of feel to it, which makes sense because the Byzantine connections between Venice and the Byzantine Empire. And this is this is on the square in front of San Marco. They've left the Christmas lights up all over Venice right through, I think, Carnival. And Carnival is starting now in Venice. They're starting their Carnival this weekend. Our workshop was held on the weekend before all of the rates just got immensely jacked up, and that's why we ended up having our workshop over Valentine's Day. And I did say that if I had to put that workshop on, and I was like, okay, we have to do it as late as possible as we can in the year, but before the rates go insanely expensive. And it's Valentine's Day. Should we really have a workshop on Valentine's Day on the weekend before? And it's like, but it's Venice. So if you have someone who's got a partner, they're like, honey, I am not gonna be here for Valentine's because I have to go to a workshop, but it's in Venice, so you want to come spend out Valentine's weekend with me in Venice? I think that's a pretty good trade-off. But this was some of the lights that they still had up from the Christmas period, and it just created this rain of light, and so I wanted to try to capture that sense of how long it was and how deep it was and how far back it went. So I raced ahead of the group and I tried to create some space between me and the next group of people walking along and capture this just sort of rain of light coming down. And then there's me at the piazza or the square of San Marco, and I did wait until there's so many birds flying around. This wasn't just happenstance that I got the bird in the shot. I could wait and take my pick and do a whole bunch of them as the birds were flying by. And that's the one that I think turned out best. You had two, really, the two there. And this is from the Doge's Palace and the prison shot, which was very far back. If you guys don't mind me. Yep, this one here. It's looking out this window. So the prisoners did get a little bit of a scene of Venice, but it's through bars and stone as well. And that's one of the little footpath bridges that you get a lot of. The other thing that I found interesting, I didn't think about too much, is that these footpath bridges have very short steps. Very, very short steps. And after a while, just by observing, I could see why. There are no cars that I remember seeing driving around Venice. Certainly not in the small, narrow streets. And as a consequence, all the deliveries are cart deliveries. So you have to get stuff on carts. I mean, you have your gondola, obviously. If you've got a back water entrance, you can have your deliveries made there. But to move around small stuff around the city, you need carts. And all of the carts are sort of like they have 4 sets of wheels, one a longer set and then a back set, and that way they can drive down the steps and up the steps. And if you have really steep steps, it makes it more difficult. So they have these very short stepped footbridges that are all over the city. Just makes it really easy. You're not likely to trip over them when you're busy looking around. This is also inside the Doge's Palace. You can get a sense here of all of the gold leaf and also the massive artwork. It's a little bit hard to tell the scale, but you can kind of sense from the people here. Here's an individual and the room is quite massive. I think I often find myself being weirded out by the composition of space. I tend to think of rooms like this way being like a long room, but it feels like in a lot of ways they use the space more from the length, like going along the walls. They had these long square, buildings, and instead of it being deep, it was more wide. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but basically, I find that their conceptual sense of space, where the light was, is different from how we construct spaces today. This is the outside of the cathedral, just San Marco. And I thought I had a close-up, but we'll probably come up to. We do have a close-up of this particular. There's a word for this that I'm forgetting now, but there's a word when you put artwork in this sort of space. I've got a close-up, and then you can see here we've got the lion. St. Mark's again for the symbol. Again, very close connection in Venice, like we have with St. Ursula in Cologne. St. Ursula is the patron saint of Cologne, and so her symbols are found frequently. Now what did I do to... I want to go forward and it's not letting me go forward. What did I do? Ah, there we are. Another gondola shot. Very pretty. I thought that this ghost-like image here of the building in the distance lit by the sunset was particularly nice. And again, you get a bit of a reflection here in the water as it cascades down. Yeah, so it was a very beautiful, and you can see why it would be so quiet. We're very far away from many people. We also went when the tide was rather low, so you see a lot of the algae waterline here as well. Ooh, more butt! I'm sorry that these are out of order, you guys. This is my attempt to frame one of the statues within the arches from behind, you know, so to kind of play with the idea. Because you've got the arch here, and you've got the arch feeling here, and you've got the arch in a third. And so if I would have gone back, I probably would have, I was also limited by how much distance I had, but I probably would have put a bit more room on this side, because if I'm going to go back and do this, I'd end up cutting off part of the arch. But I was trying to compose the shot in a way, but I was also very rushed. This is one of the ceilings in the Doge's palace. It's in order to do this, and I often do this when I visit places, in order to get this shot, this is not easy, you guys. No one expects the Kristi Livestream butt shot. No, this is a butt shot. Pick, I'll have to maybe change my icon to butt for this Livestream thumbnail. To get this shot, I literally did one of these. So when you see these, not only am I like, because I have no pride, you know, I don't mind people thinking I look a bit odd. But yeah, I'm stood with my camera, leaning all the way back, and then trying to balance, because it's actually takes a lot of core strength to do that. And also trying to, I was trying to get this top bit in here as straight as possible while leaning all the way back. And I should have moved up this bottom bit and taken more of the top from there. But anyway, you get a bit of a sense of the beauty of the artwork. So let's move in here, because my camera is pretty damn good and it can pick up some real detail even on a ceiling panel. And so yeah, it's really very beautiful work, of course. And I don't know what's on the sides there, but that's yeah, when I'll talk about this a bit afterwards. The therapy that I find doing these is, I forgot how much I actually find it relaxing, but we'll finish this up and then we'll go. All right, this is the Doge's palace. This here in this area, that's where all the butts are. This is the butt-filled area, this corner. And there's a lot of building like on top of each other, a lot of cramped use of space. Someone asked who painted it. There was a name that kept coming up. Like, it's not Titian, it's like and it's not Tortellini, but it's something like, somebody will know this. If you do famous painter of Venice, I know it starts with like a TIR or something along those lines. There are books you can get with his artwork everywhere. But let's just point out, right, because I still want to do that video on the Cologne Cathedral. You can see very much the Romanesque influence here, and different parts of this were built at different times. So as you move around this area, they say you can, according to the audio guide I bought, different architectural influences, but these Romanesque arches definitely date it to before the Gothic era in terms of this architectural construction. And I'll zoom in here. Zooming in. Yeah. So if I come up here, that's the staircase. Oh, you can already see a little bit. It's a really good camera, isn't it? There are the two butts. There's Saint Mark's symbol, and there's the staircase, the famous staircase from which the Doge would address people. And it's a very nice piazza, sort of, you know, space for rich people to enjoy. This is from the palace looking outwards. I always like to I like the idea of looking at things through other things, using natural window frames or arches or other features as a frame for my own picture frame. I don't know why that's like a thing. It's not like it's unique to me. Lots of people do that. More examples of the overwhelming artwork and that use of space. This area, I think, had to do with like with, if it was a judging or legislative, but you've got seats over here. It might have been some sort of court or council. Maybe this was the council room. And again, these massive paintings. The one that is probably the most famous, oh, this is just the entryway. That's a staircase going up, and this is how they decorated with all of this intricate work, the staircase going up. Oh, and that's one of my favorite pictures. But this room in particular, and this is a very famous piece of artwork. Now, sadly, the sunlight was really shining in on it quite brightly and kind of blows it out a bit. But it is the length of a tennis court, and there are over 100 figures painted into this. So this is and this was the really famous painter, whose name I can't remember. Maybe during the break I will look it up. But each of these, it was painted over, I don't know how many years and how many people, but there are over 100 figures painted into this masterpiece that is, as I said, the length of a tennis court was the estimate I saw on YouTube. It must be true because I saw it on YouTube. Venice had a lot of money. They had absolutely a lot of money. Is the council area the place where Columbus made his presentation to the Venetian council for money? It could have been. It very well could have been. Yes, James Russell. I recognize the name now that you've printed it out. Tintoretto. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Tintoretto. Tintoretto. That is actually, yes, very much the name that I saw all over, and his books were in the museum library where you could see his work. So, yeah, Venice. And this was, I can't remember. I got the audio guides in both the cathedral to just kind of walk around. There are different types of tours you can do, like the bell tower tour and this part tour, but you can just walk around part of the cathedral for free. And I got the audio guide for like €5. A lot of it went in one ear, out the other. A lot of it actually I just like recorded into my, don't tell anybody, I recorded into my external microphone on my camera because I was like, it was too much information. So I was like listening a little bit and going, checking out. And they were talking about the Fourth Crusade or something. So I was like, I'll just catch up with it later. So a lot of that audio I'm going to have to strip out because otherwise they'll sue me. But I also got the audio guide for the Doge's Palace, and there was more information in there than I could process in the hour or 90 minutes that I had to be there. Oh yes, let's go back to the one we skipped over, because this is not to toot my own horn too much, but I'm about to. I had two pictures that I took that were my absolute favorites out of Venice. This one and one that was of gondolas in one of the canals. We took this at Academia Bridge. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. At sunset. Once again, my camera did so much of the work for me. It was not this light. You can see that there are street lights on everywhere, and as a consequence, you get the reflection in the water, which is was really, really, really nice. And I took a couple of shots, but this one is the one that I preferred. You get a little bit of a boat here to see the life on the canal, but mostly what I like about it is, one, the tones of it, the warm rose tint of it. Just sort of, it's like looking at Venice through rose-colored glasses. It really is. And then the other thing I really, really like about this picture is the fact that I captured all of this reflected light. And had I had a camera that just saw what my eye was seeing, it would not be nearly this sort of magical in terms of the color and the tone and everything else. So non-academics are allowed on the Academia Bridge. Yes, it's more wooden. I mean, I was so caught up at taking pictures, I really didn't look at the structure of the bridge, but it does stand out in Venice. And yeah, so I think I'll show you, since I mentioned it. I didn't upload it here, but I can show you on my Twitters. Here, I'll swap over a little bit and I'll find it first. Even though my background is really nice, isn't it? I found this nice background for my computer that is oil lamps or something. And that's, okay, not what I'm looking for. Twitter, not Dropbox. Okay. I did put up a poll yesterday. It's the one that's my profile is my other favorite one. So, yep, tweets and replies. Okay, so I've got some other things up. All right. This was my other most favorite picture from my time in Venice. I can't make it any bigger, but let me swap the screen now. Me small and that big. Okay, there we go. Actually, maybe you can even... No, I can't. Bring it over a little bit with the gondolas and the feeling. It's more blue and it's kind of more seafaring, and I liked the fact that these lined up, the stands here lined up in a nice geometric way, and then you sort of got the full feeling of the canals, and all the boats lined up too. I mean, I do work on my composition. I don't just sort of like, I mean, I did make a joke on Twitter that Venice is so beautiful that you could just point at something beautiful and you don't have to be a good photographer. But I do like move myself around and look for the angles, and then I wait and I take a couple, like maybe, you know, sometimes 5 or 6 different versions of the same shot, and then I'll weed out all the ones that have a slight imperfection and optimize it to make it look like, oh yeah, I just took this shot. But yeah, let me talk a bit about how I find photography on vacation to be therapy. And then it'll probably, oh my gosh, 40 minutes. I can take some comments from the chat, and then in the second hour I thought we'd talk about the disastrous Trump presidency. But, and this is maybe a good example too, and I can also pull up the other example as well from the Venice trip. Where is it? No. There we go. Before I started doing YouTube, I found that I had a love of going to these old, especially cathedrals or any European kind of place, but especially it started with cathedrals. What I liked about the experience was the camera forces you to look at one section of life, and in the process of composing a shot you have to, you know, I grew to aware of where I start an angle, or how I complete an angle, or how I want to over include in a frame so I can crop to a certain specific, you know, to create a certain effect. And as with a film, you know, a director's job is to show you what to pay attention to. The director in a movie, they are your eyes, and it is through their eyes that you are you experience the story. And you know, I'm not saying anything I don't think that's profound, but it's the same thing with a picture. As a photographer, you are taking a subsection of life. And at least with me, I am taking a subsection of an entire city, and I am also very deliberately often stripping it of people. This is another thing about my photography, is that unless I can't avoid incidental human occupation of my space, I mostly try to erase people, because I think it has to do with capturing the sense of a place that's been built. Maybe that's because I started off with churches. The people who built it are dead. The people who are in it are tourists, or they're ephemeral. What I was preserving through my camera was the work of people who were already gone, and so the human lives fluttering through it are almost, they're not really of concern to me. So it's just kind of a juxtaposition. You need human beings to create these things, and yet in my pictures I'm always trying to get out of my shot. You're ruining my shot. And yeah, so there's, you know, the idea of balance and perspective, and you can do the rule of thirds. I think that's a really good way to start, but once you understand thirds and you can start playing with them deliberately, that's also, like, this is very much a third, a third, a third, because of the balance. Although you might want to say the middle bit, the middle third occupies less space, but I kind of think of the sky as the upper third and the water as a bottom, maybe, you know, and then this little bit here that's going to the horizon. I'm not saying I'm great and I couldn't do courses and I don't have a degree in it, but I hone a sense of what feels right for me. And I noticed that being in Venice, it's been a while since I've been on a photography holiday, since I guess Mont Saint Michel. I have a video I still have to edit for Mont Saint Michel, my trip with my friend Thomas. We would like sing a German song at one point together, and we went and visited Dunkirk. But we went to Mont Saint Michel. I like going on road trips with Thomas because he's a photog as well, and so he brings his camera, I bring my camera, and we walk around. We don't talk sometimes, you know, for hours. When we go to a location, we just disappear. We fall into the lens, and then afterwards we'll find each other, and then we'll compare. Oh, did you see this, and how did you take a picture of it, and did you do it in black and white, or what did you do with this light? And look at each other's work and admire it, and see the same location but from a completely different perspective, from the perspective of that person's lens. And the whole process, I realized as I was in Venice doing it, how much it feeds my soul. That being there and doing that process and capturing these images is actually really therapeutic. So I need to do more photography holidays, I think, where it's just, you know, I want to go to Aachen, where Charlemagne was crowned, and, you know, I could spend 4 hours with a charged up camera and just take picture after picture after picture, and at the end of the day feel so relaxed and satisfied. So anyway, this went way longer than I planned. I was actually worried that I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do 2 hours this week because I'm kind of tired. But no, I'm just nattering. If you guys ever wonder if that's something that you would enjoy, maybe you don't have access to ancient architectural structures around, but also with nature, or just, you know, things around your city, you know, take a day and go for a walk and try to see life through behind the lens and compose little pieces of life. Very much photography is it is an artifice. It's artificial in that it's selected. You know, you're filtering certain things out. And I don't use like pop filters or other Instagram filters. It's enough that my camera takes these great images. I do in that way try to stay true to life. I don't try to use filters to enhance things any more than my camera already does. But that I called it a meditation the other day, I think, to Tom, a meditation on photography. And that's, I guess, in closing, what I feel it really is. All right, so I am going to swap over now. I'll do the big me, and we'll take some questions from the chat, or I will scroll back and see if I see my name. Yeah, Kristi wants to erase people. Clip that. Yeah, so I'll go back. Butts. I'm going back to the chat. John, thank you for your £2, John Milne. Any interesting statistics or surveys you can share? If you're talking about the workshop, it was less about new findings and more about studies that are ongoing. We had a presentation, for instance, from a woman from the World Values Survey. We had presentations from I'm trying to remember. There's another study where they're trying to operationalize and measure something to do with like quality of life or life satisfaction, and that has already been funded and is ongoing. The series projects works with the SHARE, which is like an aging and retirement cross-national European study, and they give a presentation as well. So it wasn't so much like new findings so much as people getting together saying, you know, here are the challenges with the old ISCED, here's with the new ISCED, and here's some, you know, ways that we're trying to come up with solutions or things like that. All right, so I'm at the beginning now. I did make sure my mic is on. I'm looking for anytime my name was tagged, by the way, because let's see. And I took on all the corrections from 250 about Greek versus Roman. We already did that. For language nerds in the chat, some random geek put up a link there for you guys, so you can go check that out. Butt shot. I feel like we should close. We should keep our butt shot theme. So I'll go with my favorite butt shot. See, I'm torn. I'm torn between the framed butt and the butt close up. Not the double butt. Sadly, the butt on the left is not as exposed as the butt on the right, so that to me is not as a balanced shot as I would have liked. I maybe with more time could have. There we go. There's our butt shot. So we'll keep that up. Oh, you guys can't see it. All right, I'll swap it over. There we go. There we go. Can I get... I think if I just go bigger, it won't make it... It'll just zoom in. There we go. There's our butt shot for the day. I'll find a way of dragging this out, and I'll put it in the corner next to the fireplace, maybe. All right, I see 250 says, a while ago, Radio Lab, or maybe a different NPR show, did an episode about a woman who actually became the first non-binary gondola rower in Venice. I should have tried to find them. Well, okay, Venice, you know, Venice is pretty big, and there are gondolier people, or gondoliers, is that what they, everywhere. So it would have been nice, but you try to find them. So, like, unless you had an address, there is no way I could have found a particular gondola driver, or even if the non-binary person was working that weekend. But I'm glad that they have that. I think that's, you know, it's mainstreaming, and that's important, is to make sure that, yeah, you see non-binary people are doing things binary people do because they're people, and the non-binary is part of who they are, but it doesn't change who they are. All right. San Marco is a mess of a place. Everybody built on it. Yeah, I kept remembering it. Again, it does feel like there was no sense of urban planning. They build these magnificent buildings, and then literally, like, not allowing for anyone to walk back and actually enjoy the original building. They put another arch or something right in front of it, almost blocking the view. What are they thinking of? A lot of those frescoes were just Bible fan art. Well, the frescoes, of course, were, you know, commissioned by people who had a political and religious agenda, and putting themselves in with the saints. It was definitely, it was the buyer's market, right? And so that's why the Catholic Church and those people who are, you know, buying artwork that was meant to show how devoted they were, propaganda, basically, putting them on the side of God. It was the thing. Am I going to frame any of these pictures for my house? You know, I have so many of these types of pictures that I've taken, and all they do is sit on a hard drive. And occasionally I'll dust them off. It's more the process of taking the pictures than displaying them, but I could. The one, to be honest, I did think about getting those two that are my favorite. The one of the blue tint gondolier one, and then the one at sunset. I was like, one of them at least. I did make. Hold on. I did make my background. So they do get repurposed into backgrounds on my computer or other places. So they do sometimes see the light of day, but otherwise, no. DH actually has gondolas for delivery. They have ambulance gondolas, and they have delivery gondolas. I mean, you hear sirens and a gondola going by. Sorry, I'm getting... touch my nose, sorry. Yeah, so you do have ambulance gondolas and delivery gondolas and everything. So, Magenta Tintorino, we already talked about him. No, it wasn't Bellini. James, you can't travel. Okay, well, I don't know. I would imagine that increasingly you might even have a chance to do like VR in different areas where you could, in theory, you know, do a VR video and put on VR glasses and at least trick your brain like an IMAX into thinking that you're there. I'm sorry you can't travel. The stupid thing to me as an American is how close things are. In the States, if I want to go to St. Louis, you know, from Wisconsin, I gotta drive 6 hours. And there's nothing in St. Louis that's that much different from Wisconsin. I mean, you might get, you know, like more southern barbecue pork or whatever else from a couple different restaurants. But they speak the same language and they have the same culture as you do in Wisconsin. But I woke up on Saturday morning in Venice. I woke up, opened up my curtains to my hotel on the canal, went down, had breakfast on the canal, and then within 5 hours, I was looking at the Cologne Cathedral again. And it was, you know, Kirsch and Bratwurst and all the kinds of, and German language and German culture, and so close. You know, it took me less time to get between those two cultures than in the States. So I'm trying to do more of taking advantage of that and appreciate it. I also like my photos to be free of people as possible, says James, unless I'm actually setting out to photograph them. Yeah, because I think in the case of architecture, it's the expression of the building, you know, that you are focused on. And people, if they're there, they're just sort of like milling about. They're not an active part of what you're trying to capture, the spirit. I remember being in Barcelona, and that's very much the case with Gaudi's buildings, is that they stand independent of the humans occupying them. And you want to, I mean, I at least want to frame and capture, excuse me, that the spirit of Gaudi in those shots. So one of my friends didn't like cinematography in The Last Jedi, and that's why he didn't like it. Last night I started to watch what was it called, Safe House, 2000 and something 12 movie with Denzel Washington and Ryan Reynolds. And initially, almost immediately, there is handheld camera work throughout, and I found it incredibly distracting. I found it, yeah, sometimes the cinematography can distract you rather than tell the story, and that's unfortunate when the mode of storytelling is in conflict with the content of the story. Art is subjective anyway. True. You can judge art, but it's not definitive, and sort of, you know, like everyone can have an opinion. Toast to the Opportunity rover, going 14 years beyond its original mission of 90 days. Agreed. Yes, Opportunity. Can we just take a moment with our coffees here and to say thanks for all the data. You went above and beyond, and we didn't realize how much we were going to miss you until you were gone. So, to Opportunity rover. What am I drinking? In the morning, always coffee. Well, there's two things. My mom sent me some Crystal Light from the States. Like an entire envelope's worth of Crystal Light packets. I know people are going to go, aspartame, but they've got fruit juice kind of drinks here with way more sugar, and I'm trying to stay off sugar for teeth and health and calories and stuff. And so, one chemical versus the other. So this is a Crystal Light lemonade, which goes really super well with coffee. No, obviously not. But who has the best celebrity butt? That's, you know, I would love to judge that competition, and I am happy to, you know, like have multiple categories for butt appreciation. That's fine. Rum and cream. I'm not drinking rum and cream. Did you spit some bars over that butt? I should have. And speaking of bars, in the second hour, which we're probably already into, my internal clock is telling me. Yeah, it's almost 1 o'clock. I told you my internal clock is pretty good. I want to bring you up on, after we do the Trump drama, I'm hoping to find time, we'll have time, to talk about some more YouTube rap drama, because Screwface Gene is dissing on Dax, and there's some drama here. I'll catch you up at the end of hour 2. So we'll finish up with the chats here, and then we'll take a break. I will warm up my coffee because it's gotten quite cold, and we'll go into hour 2. So Memento Mori says, good morning, Kristi. Good morning back. Mike says everywhere, I think you're talking about Venice, blows it on urban planning. Yeah. They didn't really think too much. All the pictures are saints and peoples, angels and prophets speaking to the various doges. It's more propaganda than anything. Agreed. Like a lot of religious art. I mean, some of it obviously is, you know, true spiritual veneration, but a lot, you know, stained glass windows that are sponsored by guilds are propaganda. Is Venice real? I can vouch it is real. It is. I've been to Venice 7 times, someone says. Kristi, why are the statues of Roman gods in a Christian city? I've never understood why Renaissance artists did that. Didn't they believe those gods are false idols? My take on this is that, you know, so historically, the Christian church took over Rome in terms of its structure. So you had a Jewish offshoot religious sect that was populated by pagans. And the pagan part of Christianity can reconcile reconciles much easier that pagan tradition than the Jewish one. So the idea of God being three in one is anathema to Jewish theology, and yet for pagans that came into early Christianity, the idea of a man either being the sort of the offspring of a mortal immortal union, in the case of, you know, with Jesus with Mary and his underage mother being impregnated without consent because she was too young to give it, if we talk about modern day standards, that was an easy idea for pagans to accept because they had a tradition. They also, as Professor Bart Ehrman, who I would say How Jesus Became God, I would recommend his book. How Jesus Became God by Bart Ehrman will tell you a lot about the reconciliation between these ideas. Also the idea that a human being could be elevated by a god. There are stories of just men who were born from two mortals who did such outstanding deeds that they were elevated to a sort of semi-divine status. That's also very compatible with pagan thinking. And so by the time, and remember that it was, Christianity was founded by Jews as a Jewish messianic cult offshoot, you know, apocalyptic messianic sect. But Paul's preaching and the outreach eventually meant that there were way more pagans in this Jewish offsect, until the point where we see in the Gospel of John, you start to see the break. So if you read Christian historians or go to earlychristianwritings.com and then look at the Gospel of John, it will talk about the theological break. And one of the reasons that historians think that the Gospel of John is so, you know, anti-Semitic is because it's breaking itself away from the Jewish part of the Christian history at that point. By the end of the first century, by the 90 of the Common Era or the 100 of the Common Era, Jewish groups were having people say that they, you know, like they didn't think Jesus was God, and that drove a real permanent break between the Jewish part, the Jewish part of the religion, which was Peter's tradition, that eventually died off entirely, and then you've got the sort of Pauline Church, which was the pagan-oriented theology that ended up winning out and dominating, so that it looks like it was always meant to be that way when it wasn't. But in the Gospel of John, you see this real break, and increasingly, you know, it was the Greek-speaking world and pagans that were converted over into Christianity, and then we fell into the Dark Ages. All right, after the fall of Rome, everything in terms of intellectual life collapsed, and when people rediscovered the ancient writings and the ancient statues, there was a conflict in early, you know, about it, but the obvious superiority of the artwork, the obvious superiority of the intellectual prowess. Now, not that it was always right. Aristotle got a lot of things wrong. Plato got a lot of things wrong, but their system of thinking was far more sophisticated than anything Christian theology had developed. And therefore, they emulated the Greeks, and they emulated in terms of art and the Romans in that way. So, especially like within Italy and Venice, around Italy, you still had all those Roman structures, and so maybe there was also a sense of desensitization to it or incorporation of it. And here, it's not meant, these statues of what I assume are Zeus and Ares or Jupiter and Mars are meant to be symbolic. They're not meant to be worshipped. And I think by the time the Venetians were doing this artwork, this sort of separation of we can take from and be influenced by the classics in our decoration, but when it comes to our actual worship, we stick to Christian themes. And that's how I think they kind of balance those out. I talk too much, you guys. John, you don't have to keep paying me, but thank you very much, by the way. I appreciate that. And of course, it'll be going to the podcast for the happy hour. The contributions, you guys, thank you very much for supporting that. I'm late because of work, but I know I have 3 happy hours to catch up on this week. I've also increased the quality by adding in an intro song, and Bruce is going to be adding a legal disclaimer at the end of the show as well, so you can look for those in the episodes to come. Out of intrigue, did you vote in my recent Twitter poll related to Comicsgate that I helped retweet? And if so, what was your vote? I don't remember. I don't remember what day it was, and I do remember retweeting it, and I don't remember what the question. I'm really sorry. If you put it in the link, I will try to bring it up in the second hour. Tag me in. Don't have to pay me again, John. And I'll try to remember. I'll look to see if I voted or not. Let's see. I'm just gonna. Good afternoon, Kristi. All right, I'm catching up now to Memento Mori, so I'm getting near the end. Sabrina's having to leave. Bye, Sabrina. Thanks for stopping by. Lonely Wolf. Hey, haven't seen you for a while, mate. Been thinking a lot about drag queens as an art form. In light of the rad femme charges of women face, I thought it appropriate, like blackface Megan Murphy article. Oh, I think drag queens as an art form is definitely. I mean, I would, as someone who uses makeup on a regular basis, and I also struggle with because it is hard to do, some of those lines and get them right the first time, and then if you screw it up and you try to wipe it off, but when you wipe it off, you take off your foundation and everything else underneath. So when I watch a drag queen get her makeup on, whatever their identity is, it is definitely an art form. The light and shadow, and oh my goodness. Right. Oh, okay. Some random geek is helping me out here. All right, I have to close this though. Yeah, I voted. Apparently, did I vote? Video games from Steam? No, actually, I don't think I voted in this one. It just won because I don't use any of these. I didn't vote because I retweeted it because I wanted to increase the response rates, but it says here, I'll conclude with a poll for people in and out of Comicsgate, again, considering comics competition. Which of these options, honestly, for you provides the best value for money relative to the actual content provided? And a single issue comic, entire manga volumes, streaming services, and then video games from Stream, which was the winning choice by only 1% though. I don't have an opinion on things, and I will say don't know or refuse to answer rather than skew the results. So that's why that's what was up with that. And we're back to the button. Okay, elsewhere in Gotham City, or meanwhile, elsewhere in Gotham City, what was that from? I remember that old campy kind of Batman. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Venice did rob Constantinople. Yes, so good. Thank you for the historical update. And I think that's going to be the end of hour 1 then. So in the second hour, we're going to come back to reality. We'll talk some crazy constitutional violations by Trump. We will also do a little bit of YouTube drama between Dax and some YouTubers. So yes, you can look forward to that or not, as you guys like. And I'll see if I can, during the break, officially work a butt picture into the window for the rest of the show. It is now 9 minutes after the hour. I always say it's going to be 5 minutes, and I usually run a minute or two late. So let's say we're going to come back at 16 minutes after the hour. That should give you guys plenty of time to stretch your legs, get a refreshment, a drink, check your Twitter, do something else. And I will see you guys back here for the second hour in, let's call it 6 minutes. All right. See you guys then. right there. Hello, everybody. How you doing? I think I'm a little bit early. I'm sorry about that, but it was just easier to come back when I was ready. So hey, how you doing? I put up the butt for you guys. So if you get tired of looking at me, you can also look at butt. I got to listen to more Tech 9. Excellent. You're ahead of me. I ended up because I got tickets to see Token when he's coming to Germany. I ended up spending more time listening to Token than Tech 9. So I have Tech 9 to be catching up with, and I'm looking forward to it because that guy can just roll like amazing. And it just makes it look so easy. Yeah, so now we're going to talk about less happy things. You do need to listen to more Tech 9. I need to listen to more Tech 9. Everyone should listen to more Tech 9. Alright, so I guess now that we've had an hour of easing ourselves into life, I do think it's important that we talk a little bit about this criminal presidency, because this is where our real challenge is going to lie in the coming months. So, you know, I don't want to too much repeat what everybody else has said, in that I think you guys know what's going on. The president acted illegally. He is violating his constitutional rights or oath, or sorry, he's overstepping his constitutional authorities. He's misusing the law. I mean, the thing is, when you have somebody like Trump who has already committed an impeachable offense with the criminality that Michael Cohen confessed to, and now you have another case of him doing something impeachable. This is before all the congressional investigations, like into the misuse of his inaugural funds, which came out. It's just like, where do you even start with his criminal presidency? And it sounds like a soundbite or some sort of political talking point, but he's a criminal. The man is a criminal. Repeatedly, he engaged in a criminal conspiracy to cover up his affairs before the election in order to deceive the American people, and committed campaign finance laws violations in order to do that. His campaign conspired actively with people who were agents of Russia to undermine the Democratic stance and tilt the election in his favor. And now, as president, he is misusing or is violating the spirit of the law in terms of the National Emergencies Act because he didn't get his way, because he's a shit negotiator. So instead of operating within the constitutional framework of checks and balances, he's just trying to act unilaterally, like he's a king. And I was listening to A.M. Joy's episode or broadcast from yesterday, and it was pointed out, and I think this is a very good point, that Trump acting in this way, we can't count on the courts necessarily to stop this action. If Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham side against the Constitution, basically give up their powers as a co-equal branch and bend down and kiss the ring of Donald Trump and his interests above those of the property owners who are going to experience eminent domain at the border, whether that's Native American reservation lands or private farmers, or even a church that's in the way of the wall that is at risk of being for eminent domain. They're going to kowtow to him and his power. We can't necessarily count on the courts. It was the point to save us, because the courts are now stacked. And if you look at the Muslim ban, okay, he had to go back like 3 times to tweak the ban to make it constitutional, but the court eventually gave him the travel ban that he wanted. We need Congress to step up here, and I have confidence the House will step up. But more and more, as we go along in this criminal presidency, the choices for Republicans are between patriotism and loyalty or oligarchic rule and only a facade of democratic legitimacy. we're at yet another constitutional crisis. We have one in the Mueller investigation. Now we have one with this illegal executive action. And this is not like, you can go back and find Lindsey Graham setting his hair on fire over the deferred, the deferred something of children of DACA. I can't remember what the A is. Someone in the chat will tell me. Deferred action. Right, on the children of people who'd come in. In that case, the president was using his authority to put an order, like decide who gets it, how the law should be enforced, like in what priorities should be given, and also what should not be a priority. That's like if a police commissioner said, we're really going to focus on vandalism, and we're not going to really try to bust people for drinking in public. That kind of judgment, issue there. Trump is trying to appropriate money in the military, in the defense budget, that Congress has not authorized to build a wall, and just unilaterally take money away from drug interdiction and updating military construction like barracks and other facilities on bases in the states and around the world. Take money that Congress designated for those things and say, no, I'm just going to steal that money and put it over here in a project I couldn't get funded through Congress because I'm a loser. And, if it was one incident, if it was the only thing going on, you could have people in the streets over this. But because it's a reign of criminality, it's like not a reign as, well, an REIGN of criminality, but also an RAIN of criminality going on here. We're getting flooded with just nonstop crap. And like I was saying with the inaugural committee, one of the recorded tapes from the Michael Cohen raid back in the day, remember when Michael Cohen got raided and they took all of this audio that he'd secretly recorded of himself and other people, and one of the jobs of the inspector general was to listen to the tapes separate from anyone investigating the case and decide whether or not the material on that tape that he or she was listening to, I think it was a woman, this is a couple, so much has happened, I don't remember everybody's name, saying, yes, this is Trump and Michael Cohen, and they're talking in an attorney-client privilege situation, so you can't hear this, but this is not an attorney-client privilege, this is just seized tapes. One of the seized tapes was a conversation between Michael Cohen, one of the Melania Trump's friends who was helping to set up the inaugural events. She was saying in this recorded conversation, not an attorney-client privilege, just, like talking, that she saw real problems with the way that the Trumps were overbilling the committee for things like rentals at Trump Tower. So that put the New York State people onto the investigation of how the campaign how the inaugural fund, so, was it a campaign crime or an inaugural crime or an executive office crime? There's three categories of when crimes are committed over the Trump presidency. And this has now formed the basis of investigating why was Trump raising all this money when he had a smaller inaugural than Obama? Why was money for the inaugural still coming in March when they had over-raised and promised to give money to charity back in January, and all kinds of funky things going on? So it's literally every time you lift up a rock of some part of the Trump administration, there are, insects scurrying out from underneath that are potential criminal activities. And our crisis is under threat, not merely by Trump. And I think this is the point I want to make this week. There are some Republicans who bought the lie that the Republican Party was about smaller government, about lower taxes, opportunity, preventing government overreach, and fiscal discipline. And also some totalitarian things about not letting women make choices over their bodies and, enforcing a Christian hegemony on America. All right. Then there are those people who are really the oligarch class within the Republican Party. The oligarch class uses the discourse of NRA and Hillary Clinton's going to take your guns. And they use that discourse to churn up coal workers in West Virginia to vote against their own interests. I'm getting, I noticed, choppy again. So I'm going to minimize this and just talk to you all like this, because I think it might be, hold on. But, here we go. I'm going to have to check my settings. I might be trying to stream at 1080 pp, and I should maybe drop it down to 720 for the live shows. I'll check that after this, if I remember. So where was I? I was on, we talked about the inaugural, the criminality, oh yes, the oligarch class. So the oligarch class inside the Republican Party is, it's the Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham nexus, probably Marco Rubio as well. I don't know if Rand Paul is there. He's more of an ideologue than a sellout, but he can definitely sell out any moment too. But the point of this oligarch class inside the Republican Party is to mouth the words of democracy while undermining democracy, while actually trying to maintain a veneer of policies that are supported by the American people, while reworking who counts as the American people in terms of being allowed to vote. And also we see that they're not interested in protecting the constitutional rights that the founders set up, except when it comes to stopping Democrats. So a clear example of this is Republicans who will scream about debts and deficits till the walls are shaking whenever Democrats are in power. But when they get in power, they are the ones who actually blow up the deficits. You go back and you look to see which administrations blew up the debt and the deficit. You can see that Republicans run up deficits, and then during Democratic administrations in the last 75 years, pay them off. Like Clinton actually brought it down. We had a budget surplus, and then Bush came and went to war, and we had a massive deficit. And then we had the financial crisis, and Obama, under his administration, we brought that back down, and now Trump again is jacking it up. So the oligarch class is fine with spending money when it comes to the military-industrial complex or massive tax cuts. They don't care about deficits. They use the rhetoric of deficits and debts as a crisis in order to stop social program spending. It's a limiting discourse. And it's the same with executive power. Lindsey Graham will advise the president to engage in impeachable actions like in my opinion, this impeachable action of declaring a national emergency in order to do an end run around his failure to negotiate with Congress. But if Obama tries to use any executive authority, he's a king, he's a tyrant. And it's definitely something you feel if you are active on Twitter, that if you try to be progressive and you're trying to expand people's rights, you'll get people who are shouting you down using some sort of principle. But when it comes to applying that same principle to their own group, they refuse to do it. And this is, I think, the real threat. Sorry, I'm going to have to cough here. That's the real threat to our democracy. It's when I am fine with people who disagree but use the rules of the game to get their policies through, who use fair means, who win at the ballot box fairly, who win, through a policy debate or negotiations fairly. But I look at the Republicans in the Wisconsin state legislature who have a majority not because they got the most votes. It's because they gerrymandered everything. I don't see anything they do as being legitimate. I don't think Wisconsin has any legitimate elected representative policy right now, because everything coming out of the Senate and Assembly is a fraud. If I were in Wisconsin and I had enough money to be protesting outside all the time, I would say you are a completely illegitimate body. We as a people of Wisconsin should not recognize anything you pass, because you're not passing laws. You're passing propaganda based on your own form of tyranny. And this is one of our many challenges going forward, is to protect democratic legitimacy. And the main threat to our democratic legitimacy is inside our own country. And it's people who are loyal to money more than the flag, but they will use the flag as a cover to make a lot of money. And it's not a new problem, but it's showing up in a way now that is very worrying. In my lifetime, I don't remember being worried about the quality of our democracy. you know, you would have, and of course I had a privilege of that because I was a white person in Wisconsin. I didn't grow up under Jim Crow. I grew up in a state where we had same-day voter registration. I grew up in a state where in order to register to vote, you needed to bring 2 pieces of registered mail with your current address that you were registering under. If you had a utility bill, like a phone bill or a gas bill or a bank statement or a checkbook where you were writing your current checks out of, and that was your permanent address or your current address, and you could show with that, you could vote on the same day. You could show up at the polls, same day register without photo ID. Hell, in Wisconsin, if you came to the polling place with no ID, but you brought your friend, Joe Bob, and Joe Bob was registered on the polls, he was a registered voter. Joe Bob said, yeah, I know Kristi. She lives at that address. I'll vouch for her. I'll sign on her ballot registration thing to say I vouch that she lives in that address. You could register based on someone else's word who is a registered voter and vote in Wisconsin. So for me, growing up, access to the polls was like air. There were few barriers, and there was never a problem with a legitimate election. There was no problem with ballot stuffing. There was no election that was overturned because of some massive Democratic conspiracy. Town votes, you know, town boards would have 10% turnout, which you could argue is not very, doesn't have a lot of Democratic legitimacy, but, you know, 10% turnout, you get the election and the town would be run just, you know, fine. But that's what they're attacking now. It's what Republicans are attacking now, is who is allowed to vote. And it's Jim Crow on a national basis. This is what the Scott Walker agenda and the Koch brothers agenda is. It's to spread Jim Crow across America, not just confine it to the South. All right, so on that rant, I'll read a little bit here from the chat because I see you guys going, Kristi, Kristi, Kristi. So I'll see what you have to say. Someone is being very clever and stealing someone else's ideas. Republicans will side with their own interests. They are capitalists after all. I think we're seeing a real break, though, in the Republican Party. I know of myself of a few Republicans who now are, well, people who used to be Republicans before the mask fell, and you could easily see the oligarchic side of the Republican Party. And they might also still differentiate a little bit between like national Republicans and say their local Republican county party people, the people they know and they do events with and, you know, are on the county board with. But I think that there is a split in the Republican Party. It's probably about a third of patriots. I'll call them the patriotic Republicans, people who actually legitimately think that we still live in an agrarian economy, that the founders set out and somehow we're all self-sufficient as opposed to being dependent on wages, and therefore we need to, you can't just be self-sufficient in a wage economy like you can in an agrarian economy. But they aren't people who are, I think, like Joe Scarborough, who has this sense like, I never saw anybody in blackface, and then all these black, you know, so it wasn't happening where I went to school, but then it's like, yeah, you know, just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it didn't happen, and because you didn't see it as a white person doesn't mean you can speak for all white people, Joe. You know, those kinds of Republicans who mean well, they just have a different worldview. And then there are people who just really only care about power and money, and those are the Republicans that scare me. Manafort apparently has a stack of state-level charges still to come. Manafort is fucked. That guy, he better be praying for a pardon, because that's the only way he's going to breathe free air again in his life. Yeah, the Manafort case. I mean, seriously, like, I could have done 2 hours just on what happened in the last 7 days in the Trump case. I'm really upset about how laggy I'm being, and I'm sorry, you guys. It's annoying me. Paul Manafort, as you guys might know if you've watched the news, he got busted a couple times. He got busted trying to tamper with witnesses while he was arrested. Then he made after he got convicted. So he, like, how far back do you go in the Manafort case to start the story? Paul Manafort was charged in 2 different venues, DC and another one, I don't know if it was New York or whatever. He was offered an opportunity to have the cases tried concurrently. He decided not to, decided to do them in 2 parts. His first case went to court and he went through the trial and was found guilty. Because he was. On most of it. I think there were some things that people were hung on, but the jury was hung on, but he had enough to get convicted. because he left a massive paper trail and money is easy to document and track. So then he decided to plead guilty to all the stuff in the second venue because he knew he was. And he entered a cooperation agreement with the government, but then he tried to subvert the cooperation agreement and leak information and be like an inside guy to the Trump people. So when the Mueller people found out about that, when it came to doing his sentencing, they're like, throw the book at him. Throw the book at him. So the Mueller investigation had a chance to do their recommended sentencing guidelines. And what they said was he's done nothing to mitigate he's eligible for 19.5 to 24.5 years on the convictions he already has. And they said there's no mitigating circumstances. He didn't cooperate. And if anything, he was the leader of this. So he was the one who benefited the most. He took the most profit off of these corrupt exchanges. Paul Manafort was the one who was leading it and directing people. So if anything, he should have a penalty in terms of more time served, because he was the person in charge of this. He was the leader of it. And we want to dissuade people like Paul Manafort from doing this again, and also be an example to other people. So he is fucked. And in terms of state level charges still to come, yeah, I know that with federal crimes, I don't think that I also suspect that I don't know that a federal pardon would also reach down to state level crimes. So yeah, there's a lot of people going to be going to jail after this, whether or not at all. If Trump is impeached during the course of his administration, these investigations will continue afterwards. So there's people going to be going to jail. If the wall is to be funded, I couldn't think of a better budget than coming from military budget. Yes, I mean, the military budget, the idea of a national emergency and protection of the border, one could say could either be from Homeland or the military, and that's where he's going. And it should be interesting because we'll see if the Republicans, who are all happy about him, doing this, are happy to have money taken out of budgets that are going to be spent in their districts. I personally hope that Lindsey Graham sees millions of dollars being taken away from his state, and then we'll see how he feels about it. Capitalism in decay is fascism. Well, I don't know. I mean, economics and politics are intertwined, but not necessarily causally linked. And I think it's what we're seeing now is fascism rising because of a lack of political courage and moral authority, not so much because of capitalism per se. I think the forces of capital, like the oligarchic forces, are always there, and they can hide themselves as democracy as long as they can manipulate the vote. Right, so what I got? Now I'm talking crazy. Vouching for voters sounds like letting the common people decide who votes. Yeah, imagine that. And what's one of the nice things I like about Kamala Harris's slogan of "for the people"? That is not the practice, but the spirit. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. And her notion of being for the people can mean a lot of things in terms of her service. And also the idea, again, of capturing a government that isn't beholden to the Trump agenda, to these narrowly tailored interests, but actually represent a wider swath. We have in a country as large as ours, and in any country, a variety of viewpoints. We're always going to have disagreements. No one's ever going to be 100% happy with the law. We're never going to get 100. Like people who said, Nancy Pelosi funded some fencing. Yeah, our Constitution is set up for compromise. You are never going to get everything you want because we don't have a government of dictatorship. In the UK, when a party is elected, they hold power absolutely until their government collapses, or after, traditionally 5 years, they'll hold an election. And they can restructure the education, they can restructure, they can operate very, very freely without some checks from the House of Lords, and maybe on some, their backbenchers might rebel, but they can institute whatever policies they want. That's not how it works in America. We're always going to be pissed off with the final version, and I think the sooner we people accept that Nancy Pelosi can't deliver 100% of what you want, but she can get maybe 50%, and that's how it's set up to to work. And if you don't like it, then you have to change the process. You can't just yell at the people. You can't just yell at the people involved. James says, I'm amazed by how few Americans actually vote. There's a question as to why Americans tend to vote less. And it's not merely an access thing. We also just have a lot of elections. And so people, in a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? People are most likely to vote in an election over which they have the least influence. So it's an inverse relationship. You see the highest turnout in presidential races because they get a lot of attention. The president is a single person. It's easy to do a horse race between two people and get on board. It's like, picking a football team. But as an American, your vote for president is 1 out of millions. The chances of your vote in a presidential election actually tipping the scales is none. I mean, I'm sure there is a probability somewhere, but we've never seen it happen. But in local elections where people's vote counts a lot more, like I mentioned before about some town votes have 10% turnout. You have a lot of power when your vote is only one of 10% of the people who are voting. But in the States, we have a lot of elections, and we have, for example, now not every state is the same, but I'm just going to go from the one I know, Wisconsin. We have partisan elections, so the typical sort of running for your state senate, state assembly, governor, U.S. Senate, Congress, then you have a president, and so you get governor, members, Senate, Assembly, all the way down. And then you have the nonpartisan elections where you elect the county clerk and the county coroner and the county sheriff and some judges. And then in Wisconsin, you also elect the superintendent of education, you elect judges, you elect the lieutenant governor, you elect the attorney general, secretary of state. There's a lot of chances to vote. And there's some argument that because we vote so often, it actually kind of doesn't increase voter turnout. It can just make people sort of like check out. So let's see. I saw a question mark somewhere there. Compulsory voting has its problems. Agreed. Have I spoken on the dangers of the anti-BDS movement in the U.S.? I don't know what that is. So no. Could I speak on Russiagate is nothing more than a cover-up for Israeli collusion? Again, that's not something I've seen any evidence for. Technically, you don't have to vote here per se. Just get your name checked off at the polling place. Oh, well, you mean go and show up if you have mandatory voting? James, are you in Australia? So are you saying that basically you could go as an Australian and, not even have to spoil your ballot, but you can still comply with the law? I'm not sure what you're saying there. Dum-da-dum-da-dum. As a teacher, a real national emergency is every time I have to do an active shooter drill at my school. Yeah, I completely sympathize with that. I can't think of any other country in the world that has to have active shooter drills. And the problem is we have too many guns. It's not about, there was the Aurora shooter, which we haven't even talked about. I mean, another mass shooting. Mass shootings don't even get attention anymore because there's so much news going on and they're so common that it's like, oh yeah, another mass shooting in America, another desensitization problem we have. I saw reported that the Aurora shooter was not legally, shouldn't have legally had a gun. Well, if you have guns everywhere, then whether or not you get access, so in some ways it's like debating the laws about, oh, well, this guy shouldn't have had a gun, or he got a gun legally. It sort of misses the point that we are drowning in guns and access to guns. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole societal problems and a norms problem, and with also the conflation of, hunting rifles and self-defense, handguns, and then just assault rifles, which are tools of massacre. And all of those three get bunched under the term guns. And I think about, I've mentioned this before, that my dad has a gun safe. He's got over a dozen rifles. And it's not, he doesn't even sort of like, he's not like a mad collector where he loves rifles. It's just, you need different types of caliber for different types of animals. And he hunts and eats in Wisconsin, where you can't use the same caliber on a squirrel as on a deer, so you need different weapons. I'm not opposed to people having hunting rifles, but yeah, I mean, the one thing that Trump's administration president did that I unequivocally agree with is the banning of the bump stocks. And I hope his administration did more to take away access to, you know, mass murder tools than Obama did. Yet that probably won't come up in the next election, at least not from the right side. Gotta crash, folks. Good night. See you later, Tom. Thanks for staying up so crazy early, or getting up so crazy early. Let's see. Gonna go down. Still scrolling down. See you guys having a chat back and forth. All right. Did I catch all of the? Oh no, I see some here. All right, I missed one. What do I think about the Muslim guy who was refused an imam in his execution? I don't have an opinion on that because I don't know about that. So generally, if you ask me on my opinion on a story and I haven't seen it, rather than just making up, I do try, rather than, unless I have some framework for it. But if I have no idea what you're talking about, I'm never going to give you just some bullshit answer I've made up off the top of my head. I will tell you I don't know, and until I know more, I don't want to speak on it. I would rather just say don't know, and I'm ignorant on that topic, get back to me, than to make up an opinion and then have to go back on it a little bit later. Okay, so I think that's kind of it. I mean, we're in between elections. We are in some ways, other than being, you know, activism with our members of Congress and staying aware of these issues. There's not, you know, it's like we delegate a lot of our power in democracies and representative democracies to our representatives. Personally, I'm very happy so far with what Nancy Pelosi's done. I'm generally, I'm not as pro Pelosi, like I'm not mad pro Pelosi, but what I'm not is mad anti Pelosi. And I see a lot of people who've bought into the Republican line about how she's evil. She represents San Francisco. Don't tell me that woman's not progressive, all right? You know, she's not going to get, the fact that she was from San Francisco is crazy, because the Republicans say that she's a crazy progressive leftist, right, with Mitch McConnell basically drooling to vote on the Green Deal. And then in the farther left, people are like, oh, she's a corporate shill, she's a centrist. So here's what I know. Nancy Pelosi, when she is in the House, she is one of the best politicians I've seen in my lifetime. I think Bill Clinton, his moral character aside, he was a great politician in that he could make deals happen, he got things to work, or he was able to advance an agenda from a politics point of view. I see Nancy Pelosi, she knows her power. She knows how to, you know, it's the Kenny Rogers song, know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, know when to run. Nancy knows her power, and she uses it tactically. And I think she's doing the best job of providing a check and a balance on this president that we've seen yet. And I'm very much looking forward to her bringing up this joint resolution. So let's talk a little bit. This will be the last thing I think we mention. Pelosi is an asshole, but she's our asshole. I mean, she's progressive by U.S. political standards, right? Yeah, and that's the metric here, because she's an American. So I don't think it's fair to judge her by European standards. And from American standpoint, she is much farther to the left than, say, a Joe Manchin. Right? And she's leading the House, and yet, you know, and because she compromises, I think people think she's compromised, but she's always working for the best deal she can get, or she's operating in the minority within the power, you know, before she was elected to leader, Speaker of the House. I was going to say something. Oh, we were going to talk about, this joint resolution. I mentioned it on the happy hour. I think it's worth mentioning again, this reporting I saw on Rachel Maddow with regards to the national emergency. The way that the National Emergencies Act works is that if Congress has a problem with how the president has, or what the president has declared as a national emergency, the House can introduce a joint resolution of objection, or objection resolution, that they can vote on. And if the House and the Senate both object to the national emergency, then the president has to veto it. And you would, if you wanted to override it, you would need then 2/3 in both the House and the Senate to override the veto. Don't know if we can get there, but at least in having the discussion about the constitutionality, not only of the declaration, but the impact of it, as was pointed out by that guy from Colorado. I can't remember. I think he was from Colorado. He went off on Ted Cruz about if in my state of Colorado, There were attempts to exercise governmental eminent domain and steal acres and acres of land from farmers and ranchers. You better believe I'd be up here opposing that. And this will be a test of Republican principles. There was an opinion piece saying the only thing that Trump is good at is making Republicans violate what they think are their core principles, or what they state are their core principles. You know, if you think that government overreach and small government is the solution, how can you justify eminent domain all along the border, considering that crossings are going down? So that joint resolution will definitely pass the House. There might even be some Republicans who join on that, and then it'll go to the Senate, and it will be more a way to put Republicans who are going to have to run again in 2020 or maybe 2022 on record on these issues of the government stealing people's private property, and where the Republicans stand on that. Going down. Of course, you should be planning on how to outmaneuver in the next fight. I don't know what you're talking about there. Sorry. Bill Clinton backed Boris Yeltsin's dictatorship over Russia's elected parliament. I would have to go back and look at what the state of the Russian elected parliament was at the time, and Yeltsin's dictatorship, again, you're making a claim that I can't empirically, like, I don't know the framework enough from the Russian side. I do remember that there was that little revolution in Russia where the upset happened and all of that stuff, but you can say that, but I don't know if that's actually the case, that it was a dictatorship. So is the Smollett case the one with the black actor who got attacked? I don't know. Maybe you guys are having a sub-conversation, James. So Pelosi has had some kind of popularity boost recently. Yeah, because she gets shit done. I think this, the reason that she's had some popularity, I mean, Nancy Pelosi's always been a badass. This was not new. However, she's now in a position to show off her badassery better than ever. I mean, when she ran the House before, she did not ever put up a bill that she did not know the vote count for. Oh, my phone is starting to run out of battery. Hold on. The one thing about this camera is that it does chew through battery pretty quick. Sorry. That didn't make much sense. What I meant to say was the app that I use to broadcast use my mobile phone as a webcam goes through battery pretty quick, and normally I remember that I need to plug it in before I go on air, and this time I forgot, so I'm just going to do that right now. Is that the right way? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So now we won't get cut off. The camera won't get cut off halfway through the show. I can't remember what I was talking about now. Absolutely not. So I'm not saying Bill Clinton was perfect, so you can always bring up something Bill Clinton did that was bad, but if you want to talk about a domestic policy politician, and I was talking about domestic policy and his ability to negotiate, and you can say, yeah, the crime bill, but America was a lot more on the right in that time period. The support for the death penalty was higher. Well, basically, we were talking about racist white people who wanted to jail back black people. You can talk about it like that, and I'm not going to disagree, but politicians are also reactive, and so the context of that is also, I think, worth considering. That was going to be it for that, I think. Oh, you know what? I really like the screensaver I have. I know you guys don't. It doesn't necessarily look like a screensaver because you're seeing the stuff in the back. Wallpaper. That's the word I'm looking for. Wallpaper. This is called, I think, oil candles or oil lamps or something on your Microsoft thing, but it's got some really nice background scenes with these lit candles in different pictures. So maybe check that out. I was being a bit hyperbolic, but Yeltsin was trying to exercise unilateral power and Clinton backed him. Well, again, I mean, that's international negotiations. That's not dealing with Republicans, which was the context that I was thinking of in terms of being a politician. I mean, there's presidential power offside the shore. That's the diplomatic side of it, and I was speaking more to the internal politics. They are cool screensavers, are they not? Yes. Your European time zone make it difficult as an Australian to catch you. But hello anyway. Hey, Unchained. Good to have you here. By the way, so I should probably I'll have to try to make set up the hangout for this right away after the show. I'll make a note. Hold on. If I don't write things down, I say them and then I forget. I have this. Yeah, you guys know how my brain works. All right. Next week, Sunday, is my birthday. Yay to getting older. I'm still planning on being on air, but I realize I have a slight scheduling conflict. Next Sunday is also the Mädchensitzung, which is the carnival party in Ehrenfeld that I go to with friends every year. It's the women's party. It's so carnival season will start Thursday. So on Thursday when I go to work, if I decide to go to work, I might just take some vacation because I've been doing a lot of traveling. But we will kick off carnival at 11 minutes after 11. We'll start drinking, and it will be the first 5 days of carnival is like the big kickoff, and then it will go until right before Ash Wednesday. When that starts, that following Sunday is the Mädchensitzung, because carnival is starting kind of late this year, relatively. We go out to Ehrenfeld. I think I've shown you this. I've been drunk at this party before, and I've done like put things on Twitter and maybe even like put some stuff up on YouTube. It's that party again, and that's on the 24th as well. So it starts at noon, and and my show starts at noon. And I've also said I would have my patron hangout next Sunday, and that normally starts at 6 or 7 p.m. and I'm going to be pretty drunk at 6 p.m. next Sunday. So what I propose is that I do an earlier show and maybe only for an hour. So I have to decide if I want to do the show in costume or not. Because if I get up and get in costume and then just go on air, I can finish the show and then go meet my friends. If I do the show, then I have to make sure I leave myself enough time to get ready and then be on air. So I'm kind of thinking, do I mind saying how old I am? I'm going to be 47. Yes, I'm getting pretty close to 50. I'm noticing more gray hairs, although I do pretty well on the not having too many gray hairs area of life. Hold on, I'm gonna just see if this. I'm gonna try to clean my camera lens, if that helps at all. Anyway, yeah, so I'll be 47. Da 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 da. Yeah, I don't know if that means anything. So I might be doing next week's show in costume. And then earlier, a couple hours earlier. And then I think I'm going to start my patron hangout at 8 o'clock in the evening because I am going to be very drunk still, probably. But I will have sobered up enough, I hope, to let some random geek run the show for me. So I'm going to show up in a very merry way, very merry, being like drunk way, and merry in the British sense of being merry, and we can do it from there. So that might happen. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about doing for next week. So I will preliminarily set the time, I think for 3 hours or 2 hours earlier. If I get up at 9 and I give myself an hour, that should give me enough time to get ready, and then I can be on air from like 10 to 11 and then leave the house and meet my friends and get there for the 12 o'clock start. So I'll figure it all out. So subject to some change and other things, next week's show will be at a different time. I think most women dye their hair before they get to 47. I'm hoping women will stop dyeing their hair, honestly. Well, also some random geek said 34 and you have gray. You know, having gray by the time you're in your 30s that's pretty natural. I think I actually was thinking about doing a video about embracing your gray. And one of the things that I would say about having gray hair is if you're old enough to have gray hair, you should be like to the point in your life enough, you know, to not give a shit about having a gray hair. Gray hair is inevitable, like wrinkles. And yeah, I know when it first starts happening to you. That's I get that. You see your first gray hair and you're like but honestly, if you live to be 70, you're going to spend more of your life with gray hair than not. Some people are fully gray by the time they're in their 40s. Other people go fully gray way earlier. But if you think about it, you're going to have gray hair for more of your life than you don't if you live long enough. So I think there's I personally, well, there's a self-confidence thing, there's a societal thing, it's kind of complicated. And my relationship with my gray hair changes too, because it's a constant challenge to me. Insofar as, like, I'll first wave, you get your first gray hairs, and it's like, gray hair. First of all, why? Just because society tells you that it has to do with aging and we're supposed to fear getting old, but getting old is natural. So why do we make something that we can't control or stop a thing of anxiety? And that was one of my first things. My mom growing up was very concerned about gray hair and wrinkles, and I absorbed a lot of those values. And then as I got older and was exposed to more feminist critiques and started to break down the beauty industry in the way that it conditions us to think that that we need them. We need to not have gray hair. We need to not have wrinkles. And by needing them, we create we're financially dependent on them. So that critique helped me out a lot. But then I had the first gray hairs and then thought, okay, I got used to those. And then, you get some more. And so I think it's kind of like a desensitization. The last show we did, I watched back and I noticed that in one part of my hair, all my gray hairs had kind of like clumped up. So it looked like I had a streak of gray. And I was like, and then I went, oh, well, that's okay. So as more of them grow in, I'm sure it'll be like, oh, no more gray hair, but then also accepting it and knowing that I get comfortable with it. So I would hope that more women and men would feel comfortable being gray. And it can be totally sexy. I know we fetishize youth, but for me, my gray hair is my experience and my confidence and having like zero fucks left to give. So that's why I don't color my gray. I have no interest in. Also, I'm lucky in that I've got a really nice silver gray. It's not like a dingy color. I mean, I'm sorry if you don't like your color gray, but it's a really nice silver that I have growing in, and I think I'm just going to go with it. I don't have that many gray hairs, 44, but your beard is getting whiter with time. Yeah, that's experience in life. I look about 35. Oh, thanks. And 15? 35 plus 15? Got your first gray hair at 16. Wow. Yeah, some random Greek. Embrace your gray. Yeah, why be a slave to the dyeing industry? Why? And I mean, it's not even like the chemicals and stuff. I dyed my hair a lot when I was younger. I've been cherry, like fire engine red. I've been platinum blonde. Never really went with a darker color like an ebony. But I had all kinds of colored hair except for completely gray. So let's see what that looks like. Human body is only designed to be 35 before you break your leg and a lion eats you, says Data Port Doll. Yeah, and the average life expectancy in, say, the 1st century of the Common Era when Jesus was alive was 28 to 32 for men, either between disease or war. If you were just part of the working class, if you hit 35, if you hit 45, you were like pretty old in especially the poorer communities. So, and honestly, as I'm getting into my 40s, I feel like, okay, it's not that I'm an expert in the world, but I've just seen enough. Like, I'm like, okay, if I died tomorrow, it'd be kind of soon, but honestly, I kind of got the hang of this world. And there's things I could see, but yeah, by 40 years, that's enough. I don't embrace yours as such, but you're too lazy to do anything about them. Yeah, I mean, I think ambivalence is also a perfectly acceptable reaction to your gray hair. What I would wish not for someone else is what I would not want them to experience is seeing a gray hair and suddenly feeling anxiety about their looks. About your mortality, that's understandable. We're all going to die. I think a bit of remembrance of death every day is a good thing because it puts stuff into perspective. In that, Buddha said his greatest teacher was death. And that's because there are times when I get angry about, Germans, and not just Germans, Italians, I notice do this too. People who get on a bus and instead of going all the way down the carriage, as they do in London, hats off to the Brits, you guys know how to use public transportation optimally. You force people to get away from the doors and actually go into the aisles so that all the space can be taken up by passengers. Dumbass Germans and Italians who just get on something and then they just stand right in front of the door And I want to go sit on the back of the bus because there's way more room because nobody's back there. Everyone's standing, and then they look at me like I'm the asshole. I'm like, get your fat ass out of my way. Move. Why are you standing here with your luggage in front of the doorway when you know everyone has to come? Sorry, you continue. Okay, then I have to remember, right, this is not important. This is not important. Someday I'm going to die. This is not worth me getting upset over. Serenity now. So, okay, hold on. All right. Can't tell the light-colored hair is white or blonde. Just call him blonde in that case. Kristi, I read a sci-fi story once about an alternate universe where the intelligent Neanderthals ruled the world. They called their leaders the High Grey Council because they venerated the elderly. Yeah, that's another, people in ancient cultures, especially when you didn't have maybe as much access to literacy and written materials or an oral tradition. People who lived the longest knew shit. They were the books of their day. Right? They were the Google of their time. And so if you wanted to know about an old hunting area and what it was like back in the day for a hunting ground or how you handled a certain tribe, you'd talk to the old people. And, disrespecting them would be like book burning. Like you respect your elders. So, yeah, gray hair, the Gray Council. That's good. Yeah, I'm upset over capitalism. Although, I think the thing for me is that I just have a different way of my activism in order to reform it. I'm more on the line of I would like to see a mixed mode, sort of like a Swedish model movement towards socialism rather than revolution, because in revolution you open up a system to being taken over by strongman authoritarians, as we've seen throughout history. So, all right, I'm gonna get into. Does anyone find Pelosi horny? I don't know if it's horny or hot. I think she's rocking it for a 70-year-old woman. She definitely colors her hair. My grandmother also colored her hair almost till she died, and my mom still colors her hair, and I'm going to break that tradition. One of my aunts is a good role model in the gray hair thing. She's a salt and pepper kind of, growing in, which maybe that also helps, because if you kind of growing as a salt and pepper, it's a bit more gradual than like coloring your hair and just doing it for decades without thinking about it and then stopping. So would I be opposed to trying to create a world without money? I think if you look back at human history, we've always bartered. So money itself is just an easier way of doing transactions. Right. So the stages of human commerce. There's a good book. Oh gosh, what's the guy's name? It's about the social construction of reality. I can't remember his name now. The name of the guy who wrote it, but he talked about basically how what we have, things that are social constructs, things that we develop in our minds, still have to have a physical presence in order for them to be considered real. An example would be marriage. Right? If you do a marriage ceremony, you need the piece of paper that says you've been married. So marriage itself is not a physical thing that you can observe. And so in order to demonstrate its legitimacy, we make it manifest, we make it material in order to validate it. And a marriage license, a signed marriage license as a contract, is an example of how we materialize the social construct. Money is similar. Money is merely a way to physically place into the world something that really only exists as a social construct. And the development went from, people would barter things of value to representing that value in a gold coin. And then for a long time, commerce moved, it was based on, coins, and then a little later on it was based on the movement of paper around. And eventually people realized that you could extend, you could basically make money or write money for things that money you didn't have, like credit and stuff, and you get more global transfers of money than you get international. Like you take a piece of paper from the Templars bank in one place and you take it to another and they'll honor it, right? So this idea of moving currency value across borders and things. So even if we got rid of money, you'd still have the concept of money. You'd still have the concept of value and worth. And so getting rid of the physical symbol doesn't get rid of the process that created the physicality of the money anyway. This is a really long way to say it, but go check out The Social Construction of Reality. I think his name is Philip something. There's two of them. There's The Social Construction of Reality, and then there's also one that's similar, like Constructing Social Reality, or I don't remember, but it's one of those two. Wasn't gift giving and social debt more common than barter? Well, I don't know. I mean, well, one, you'd have to go back and look more at the historical records, but in terms of how people living in an agrarian society being self-sufficient, or the aristocracy living off of the labor of the agrarian society, people were able to use what was around them to build their houses, use what was around them to build the fencing. They would have livestock that would reproduce, or they would barter for other livestock, or do some other kind of exchanges as dowry to move their movable property around. They would make their own salt, they would make their own clothes, they would spend, they did everything themselves. And so what they bartered for were for the gaps in their subsistence, things that they either wanted or to try to get more assets. Do some labor to try to equate liquidity before coins, and then and do that kind of bartering to get things that they maybe couldn't get, or do trade with other countries. And then as coins came in pretty quick. We've got Roman coins. The idea of print of mints and money, that's a pretty ancient process. So from agrarian times and self-sufficiency and trade, bartering for spices that grew somewhere else, or decorations, gold, glass beads from different parts of the empire showing up in Rome and Britain. There was always a movement of goods. People wanted things that they couldn't get access to locally or easily themselves, and using money to represent that in order to represent that wealth transfer. It's easier to carry a bag of coins than a boat full of chickens, right? I just think money is, it's a representation of value, and we need that. So just, again, getting rid of the money doesn't get rid of the representation. Labor vouchers, that's just money. A labor voucher is just a replacement for money. There's actually a really funny article from The Onion. I'll see if I can find it here. I used to use this in my lectures. Where it's a testimony by Bernanke or something. A parody of it. Yes, so here we go. I actually used this in my quants and qual course to talk about the fact that of how we can socially construct reality, that something like money that has no value outside of the value we place on it as human beings determines life or death for some people. So this is way back in 2010. U.S. economy, hold on, let me go me small. There we go. That's easier. Right. U.S. economy grinds to halt as nation realizes money just a symbolic, mutually shared illusion. Washington. The U.S. economy ceased to function this week after unexpected existential remarks by Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke shocked Americans into realizing that money is in fact just a meaningless and intangible social construct. What began as a routine report before the Senate Finance Committee Tuesday ended with Bernanke passionately disavowing the entire concept of currency and negating in an instant the very foundation of the very foundation of the world's largest economy. Sorry, we got an ad pop up there in the middle of my reading. Quote, through rising interest, sorry, let me finish the last line. Ended with Bernanke passionately disavowing the entire concept of currency and negating in an instant the very foundations of the world's largest economy. Quote, through raising interest rates, it is unlikely at the moment the Fed will, of course, act appropriately if we, said Bernanke, who then looked down, paused for a moment, looked down at his prepared statement, and shook his head in utter disbelief. Quote, you know what? It doesn't matter. None of this so-called money really matters at all. It's just an illusion. unquote, a wide-eyed Bernanke added as he removed bills from his wallet and slowly spread them out before him. Just look at it. Meaningless pieces of paper with numbers printed on them. It's worthless. According to a witness, the Finance Chair Committee sat in thunderstruck silence for a moment until Senator Orrin Hatch, Republican of Utah, finally shouted out, "Oh my God, he's right! It's all a mirage! All of it! The money! Our whole economy! It's a lie!" Screams then filled the Senate chambers as lawmakers and members of the press ran for the exits, leaving in their wake aisles littered with the remains of torn currency. As news of the nation's collectively held delusion spread, the economy ground to a halt, with dumbfounded citizens everywhere walking onto their jobs as they contemplated little green drawings of the buildings and dead white men they once used to measure as their adequacy and importance as human beings. At the New York Stock Exchange Wednesday morning, the opening bell echoed across silent floors as the few traders who arrived for work out of habit looked up blankly at the meaningless scrolling numbers flashing on the screen before us. Quote, "I've spent 25 years in this room yelling, buy, buy, sell, sell. And for what?" unquote. Longtime trader Michael Palermo said, quote, "All I've done is move arbitrarily designations of wealth from one column to another, wasting my life chasing this unattainable hallucination of wealth. What a cruel cosmic joke," he added. "I'm going home to hug my daughter." Sources at the White House said President Obama was, quote, "still trying to get his head around all this," unquote, and was in seclusion with his coin collection, muttering, "It's just metal. It's just metal," over and over again. The president will be making a statement very soon, Press Secretary Robert Gibbs told reporters. At the moment, though, his mind is just too blown to comment. So anyway, I'll stop there, but I didn't read all of this in my course. I pretty much just did this beginning about running to the end of none of the so-called money really matters at all. It's an illusion. Look at it. Worthless pieces of papers with numbers printed on it. And so, you know, not labor tickets or currency or gold coin, it all just represents the same thing, which is value. So before the Iron Age didn't trade. How am I supposed to know what happened before the Iron Age and 255? They didn't write before the Iron Age. They didn't have writing in the Iron Age. They didn't have writing before the Iron Age. So how are we supposed to know what societies did? We can only infer from our archaeology. They didn't leave us any accounting books. Cuck Philosophy has a video on social construction. I should watch all of Cuck Philosophy's videos. I showed everyone. Oh yeah, I'll just shout out someone else. I don't know who Cuck Philosophy is. All right, so before we finish, I did want to do a little bit of the shout out to Screwface Gene. I love Screwface Gene and also his fans. They are absolutely awesome. They came on before when I've done shows and were really supportive in the comments. And he's a great rapper, especially with this. So the way we're going to wrap this up today is I'm going to tell you about some YouTube drama. Oh, we're going over time. Ooh, you come for 2 and the rest are free. Yeah, you show up for the first 2 hours and the rest are free. So I think I've told you guys before about the YouTube dramas going on with, I can switch. That's YouTube dramas going on in the YouTube rap scene. And at the time it was like Quadeca versus KSI, and then some other people got pulled up into all that because their names were dropped. Well, that drama spun off into some like really unpleasant family drama between KSI and his brother Deji, and that all went like really dark. And I didn't put that up on the show because it was just too personal. And I don't mind beef that's superficial, kind of top, you know, just like reputation smacking going back and forth. So just a little update. This is like a soap opera when it comes to the YouTube scene. You guys remember, perhaps I showed a part of a video from Dax, who is a YouTube, kind of trying to bust out of the YouTube rap scene. He's trying to become more than a YouTube rapper. He wants to be mainstream, want to kind of blow up and go, yeah, mainstream, I guess. Is that a good designation? Like a YouTube rapper is kind of niche, and then mainstream means, you know, you're known in the mainstream music scene. These guys have done some collabs recently. People that I like a lot. So Crypt, Quadeca, Screwface Gene. I was watching Dax's stuff. Dax also has like a whole sub drama with Tory Lanez that if you start watching this, you'll find out about. I don't have time to go into this, but there was right. So the Crypt, who is it? Crypt and met up with Dax, and I think also I can't remember who. Deji was also part of that scene. They did this video about KSI, and Dax is definitely the biggest of all of the YouTube rappers in terms of like his professionalism. He's got a great singing voice, and he can rap. He's got a sense of his like, sort of style, and he's got a look, and he's clout chasing is one of the terms he uses. You know, he's trying to get Eminem's attention. He's trying to get noticed. He's trying to, you know, like take up some time and get some eyeballs, and chase that money, chase that success. And can I just, as a side, I don't want to get too much on a tangent, but I think there's a interesting conversation I should look for about the way that rap, which really has a powerful ability and has been used as an expression of class oppression and racial oppression and other sort of nexes of oppression of intersectionality, could have been used to challenge capitalist norms and values. But instead, you know, there was a lot of rap instead has embraced, rather than like the Public Enemy fight the power way of transforming society, instead uses capitalist goals like having a lot of money and fame and women and other sort of forms of toxic masculinity as metrics of success. So rather than using rap as a way to subvert the capitalist structure, which is exploiting the poor community, and that's especially disproportionately unemployment in the Black community because of discrimination and other factors, rather than criticizing capitalism, rap actually like embraces capitalism and its worst excesses as a path out of poverty. But yeah, anyway, like I said, that could be a whole other discussion I'm sure other people have had. However, getting back to the rap beef here, Dax put out an announcement saying that he was going to stop like doing features for only a small amount of money, starting at some point, and people, if they wanted to do features with him, should get in touch. I heard about the Screwface Jean video I'm going to show you. I saw it coming up in my subscription feeds, but because I follow No Life Shack, and I follow also, oh gosh, they have like a different name from the story. This guy, I watched his reaction last night, but it's not Dad's React. Hug Nation. Who are those guys? I can't remember. Anyway, I saw all the stuff coming up in my feed. And this, I'm going to show you a little bit of this video because it's really good. And what I would say is if you want to follow this rap beef, because I would imagine Dax is going to have to come back on this because Screwface Jean goes at him pretty hard. What happened was Dax said he would do some features. Screwface Jean had done some features with him. Crypt had done, tried to organize something. And basically Dax just kind of like rips people off. He takes their money and then doesn't do really high quality work, or he says he's going to do something, he doesn't follow up. So there's been a bit of a falling out now. And Dax put out a song saying that I'm not Joyner or Don Q. And a couple days after this, Screwface Jean did a video where he's saying I'm not Dax Joyner or Don Q. And so what I would recommend, I'll try to remember to put links. If you want the outsider's view, if you're worried about bias, or you want to, go check out Crypt's video reaction to the Screwface Jean, because he's got sort of his outsider's take. So it's not just like, personal bias. Then go watch the Screwface Jean video on this. And then you can see other people's reactions to this. But I just want to put up a little bit more hip hop because, I'm becoming a big fan of YouTube hip hop scene. Been following it for a while. But to do that, I'm going to need to put on my speakers. So let me make sure that this is turned on. And we're going to check out a little bit, yeah, that's working, of Screwface Jean's diss track on Dax. I don't think that there are captions, sadly, because, it definitely helps me sometimes. But we'll check out a little bit of this, and you can go see more and follow this drama live as it happens. You can watch some of the reaction videos. And that's what I like, too, is watching other people's reactions to this. Their takes on it. I learn a lot about hip-hop and tactics and bars and lines from watching people's analysis of these. But as I said, Screwface Jean Nation, his fan base is really awesome. And so, I really appreciated their visits last time. So it makes me like more, it makes me feel like, yeah, I like his work and I'm going to support him too. So let's check out some of this. We won't do the whole 5 minutes. And in fact, I might kind of go forward a little bit because he's got Dax in the intro. One of the things Dax talks about a lot is his background and his work as a janitor, which comes up eventually. But we're going to start with the actual song here from Screwface Gene.
Brainiac.
Sorry, guys.
Water right now, man. I'm the mouthful, man. I'm gonna say it slow so they can hear it fast. They love me for my energy. Let me tone it down, man.
So he says, I'm gonna say it slow so they can hear it fast, which means he's gonna slow down his lyrics so that you don't have to listen 3 or 4 times to catch it. He wants you to pick it up really fast as soon as you hear what he has to say.
So I can really feel it though. Lord. It's Screwface in the place and I'm about to handle you. Heard that you a hooper, well these shots about to damage you. But this ain't no suicide drill to check your stamina. I'm ill, this suicide for real for any challenge. And now low-key, it's looking like Eminem versus cannabis. The Shady's going crazy on the janitor from Canada.
Alright, yeah, so I didn't know there was a whole Eminem cannabis beef. I had to go check that out last night and learn about how like Eminem just crushed cannabis. There's some parallels with him now crushing this janitor from Canada. So, just a little bit of background for you guys.
My niggas will handle you. Ain't no man in you. Like how you manage to hold the microphone with a manicure. You true loser. All the YouTubers, they should banish you. Used to be clickbaiting bad baby if they weren't fans of you. Told Adam 22. He ain't no YouTube nigga, so point at him with 22s and shoot like YouTube nigga.
We talked before, okay, so sorry, on the cinematography, in the first part of this video, I'm going to be honest, there's too much movement for me. When I watch this on my bigger screen and it's moving around, it's really not bad if you're doing reaction videos. Especially if you have it in the smaller one. The movement isn't so profound in a smaller screen. But if you try to show this on a big screen, this amount of movement gave me... I had to look away. I had to just close my eyes. So maybe just to... if Screwface Gene ever watches this, have your camera person, your editor, just ease back on the movement. Because when you're moving and the camera's moving, that's kind of a lot to process visually at the same time. That has nothing to do with his lyrics, but I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Nigga, let's talk about that 4 horsemen shit. How you did a verse, heard ours, and re-recorded your shit.
Oh yeah. All right. So a lot of this, there's a lot of complaints about Dax, including people pay him for stuff. He doesn't do good work. But when they initially recorded the song that turned out to be the 4 Horsemen, Dax recorded his verse, and he only recorded a small amount. You get this from the Crypt version of the story. He only did a few bars, not a half a song, but like maybe a quarter. So to fill it up, Crypt invited Quadeca and Screwface Gene to join, and so then they laid down some verses, and he mixed those in, and then he told Dax, oh yeah, I'm getting ready to put this out, and Dax like, well, can I hear what it sounds like now? When he heard the other verses, he wanted to rewrite his own verse, which means his first initial one was not that great. So this is just again, like rules of the game, like how you don't operate. You don't listen to someone else's lyrics and then go, oh, let me change mine so I can be better. Like, why didn't you put your best verses on the first time? What were you getting paid for if you weren't doing the work? Now why you want to up your game now? Which is fair enough, I think.
Cause you laid your verse first, but it was whack as a bitch. Then on your second attempt, you try to throw out a diss.
Yeah, so Dax got the song back with the Quadeca and Screwface Gene verses. Crypt in his video says he hadn't put his on yet, but when Dax rewrote his lyrics and re-recorded it, he basically said, here is a song, there's like 3 random guys and a goat, and this song is some like random music that we're gonna now help make blow up. So he's on a track with 3 guys, and he's dissing them on a track that he's been invited to and got paid to. So he's not getting it. Dax, his artistic abilities aside, he is not getting a good reputation as a collaborator out of this little drama. And that's kind of what this diss in part is about. There's a couple other things he's got beef with, but it's just putting out there that this is what Dax is like and how he operates.
3 niggas in a goat, please get off.
Oh yeah, I'll go back a little bit so you can hear that line.
Recorded your shit, cause you laid your verse first, but it was whack as a bitch. Then on your second attempt, you try to throw out a diss. 3 niggas in the goat, please get off of that shit. It was 3 niggas spitting and 1 nigga rapping about his dick.
Yeah, most of Dak's lyrics were about his penis. So that's true.
And the reason you ain't pushing sounding like a funny story, cause you ain't agree with it, but still took the money for it. Where I'm from, you can get jumped, niggas getting bunny for it. With my bees in the trap, you catching a honey for it. That's a dumb bitch, leave him in the dirt. That's basically how this dude sounds on every single verse. Beep, it's Dax, I was a motherfucking janitor, and I don't know the shit cause I was a motherfucking janitor. And you don't even get it, I was a motherfucking janitor. And did I mention I was a motherfucking janitor?
So not only in this part, Screwface Gene actually tries to sound like Dax, because that's, if you listen to Dax's song, you'll hear him. He'll go, "It's Dax," in that sort of like exaggerated way, and he actually says this is what he sounds like when he's on his lyrics. Then he does like a series of bars where he's just being, or like 2 lines of bars just being Dax. So let's like hear it one more time, then we'll get going because I don't want to play the whole song for you guys. So
like a funny story, cause you ain't agree with it, but still took the money for it. Where I'm from, you can get jumped, niggas getting bunny for it. With my bees in the trap, you catching a honey for it. That's a dumb bitch, leave him in the dirt. That's basically how this dude sounds on every single verse. Beep, it's Dax, I was a motherfucking janitor, and I don't know the shit cause I was a motherfucking janitor. And you don't even get it, I was a motherfucking janitor. And did I mention I was a motherfucking janitor? We get it, but it's pathetic. By this time you should quit. We chuckle at your fake struggle every time that you spit. Now I ain't saying that you lying and shit, but you so fake, dude. You have to push that story. There's nothing else we relate to, yo.
Yeah, so you know, a lot of rap music is about people's stories, struggles coming up, and what they faced and overcome, whatever perspective they were coming from, and or area. And Dax does mention his janitor job a lot, and what Screwface Sheen here is saying is, you got to mention your struggle coming up as a janitor because you don't have anything else that we can relate to. That's a pretty harsh criticism. So anyway, I don't want to do the whole song in case you guys are the janitor. He's doing that on purpose there, James, because one thing, if you listen to a lot of Dax's songs, he mentions the fact that he's a janitor in like almost all of them. And that's, you know, him mentioning he's a janitor is not a problem, but if you do it in every song, it just gets to be a bit of a joke, and that's why he's saying your fake struggle. But yeah, your wife is a motherfucking doctor. Yeah, I feel like I should have done more prep for this, but go check out one. It's a great song. Oh, and then also, and I got this I have to say from Dad. I'll look him up on my, because they should also get a shout out. So if you want to get good reactions, not like middle-aged white lady reactions who doesn't know the scene and is just a fan and not an expert, the people you should be going to watch after this, yeah, Dad's React Script Work. That was the name I was looking for. Script Work channel. I'll see if I can pop these guys. These guys, I love them. Oh, you can't see so much because my screen is really small. So I'll go me big. Here we go. Script Work. You can check those guys out. They give you a hug at the start of every episode, which is really sweet. And yeah, they're really, really, really fun to watch. No Life Shack is another great channel to watch, and it's definitely for takes. He's hilarious. I put stuff out. I tweeted something from him out recently. He also helps me keep up with the scene. No Life Shack. There we go. There we go. He's got a great reaction to Bulls on Parade, and he's even wearing a little metalhead wig there so he can rock out. But those two channels in particular, also Indecently Decent, I watch their breakdowns as well. I find them, those three are my core hip-hop channel reactions for me to study and learn. So I would recommend, if you want some YouTube drama, I mean, the Carl stuff has been kind of dry lately, so if you're looking for a bit of YouTube drama, you can go check out the Dax video on his dealings. I'm sorry, not Dax. Check out the Screwface Gene video when he tells his experience with Dax. There's the Crypt personal experience with Dax, and then a bunch of reaction videos. So, oh, hey, thanks, Some Random Geek. Always. You're like my, yes, you're awesome. So you've got, is that Joanna's, trying to help Joanna out? Yes. You put that in the chat. And then you've got Script Work and No Life Shack's channels. So there you go. labor vouchers in order to have everyone have a flourishing life. I mean, like, well, if you, I'll let you guys have that conversation. You should have a labor vouchers as an alternative to currencies hangout between you and 250. You guys should do that. Carl being dry implies Carl is also wet at times. I did what? I just said the YouTube dramas on that side is dried up. So, and indecently decent. Excellent. All right. I'm going to get going. We've been doing for what? Yeah, 2.5 hours. Oh, I spoil you guys. And again, please watch. I will initially set up the Hangout. I think I'm going to do it for 10 o'clock for next Sunday, which would be 4 a.m. I think on the East Coast, 3 a.m. I know it gets worse. Not better for people in America. Sorry about that. And I might do that one in costume entirely. And then, like I said, the Hangout, I will definitely be off my face drunk for that one. So if I can get home and hit start recording, that's the most I'm going to expect of myself on my birthday next Sunday. You guys make this show so easy. I want to thank you for stopping by, for being in the chat, for being warm and cozy, and just a really comfortable place for me to sit and talk every Sunday. This will be the last thing I say before I sign off. My YouTube channel has changed since I started from prepared videos to more of a live stream show. I'm sometimes torn as to what I'm going to do, but I'm definitely liking this live stream format. I am committed to doing it for the Sundays. And, you know, for all of 2019, that was my New Year's resolution, was to do a live show every day, every Sunday this year. And I think even if I start going back to more pre-produced videos, some form of a weekly live show on top of the on top of the happy hour will probably be part of my regular routine, mostly because it's just so nice to spend some time with you guys. And eventually, when I get a little bit better at this, I will also try to work in, I don't know if it's going to be like a Discord link or a Skype link or something else. Maybe, I don't think I can broadcast in Google Hangout and OBS at the same time, but bring some people in for a bit of a chat, guest chat as well. You guys have a good rest of your Sunday. It's hard to say goodbye. I almost didn't want to go. I really should, and you guys need to get going too. So yeah, have a great Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for stopping by, especially for those of you who made financial contributions to the channel. Thank you very much. I do appreciate that as well. It helps with the tech, and it helps keep the podcast for the happy hour funded. So until next time, guys, I've been Kristi. People in the chat have been awesome. People watching in the future have been awesome. And we'll talk again. And I'm sure we'll see each other on a happy hour beforehand. But next Sunday, I will be in costume and then drunk off my ass. So until then, bye, you guys.